So, how's it going, kids? How's it hanging? Life is what you make it. It can be a bowl of cherries or a pile of mierda. So, and I listen to things going on all around me. Right now, there's a big fire up in Canada, and it's smoking out the whole East Coast here, which is mind-boggling because forest fires, they can do that, but they do it in a whole different way. And it seems, I don't know if you guys remember back in California days, before the COVID, I had a couple of really nasty fires that were on the coast that were like almost like downtown San Francisco, downtown LA, downtown Santa Barbara. And the suburbs that were just outside of town were microwaved. I mean, just there was this, there's this woman, I forget what her name is, but it's either Stop the Steal or Stop the Crime or Stop something. And, she's a Californian. She had a nice business. I think she's a lawyer of such or some, she's not a dummy. And she, lost a lot of stuff out of this and watched the response of her community and her government and her state and the federal government. And it was like, what? And she saw that a good deal of these fires were being started by alleged electric mishaps by the utility companies, which were all owned by the Rothschild, entities. And pretty much all our utilities are no longer public; they're all owned by entities, right? And so where I live here in it's really interesting corner of Tennessee, and Virginia's here, West Virginia's up here, Kentucky's over here, North Carolina's down here. And with that little triangle, there are those 5 states and about 6 counties, and they're all within 20 to 50 miles of each other. And since 1976, maybe, give or take. And see, the United States basically went bankrupt in basically 47, when the National Security Act was put in place. Certain things, lockstep, started occurring. We had this thing called COG, continuation of government. They started building things called DUMBs, deep underground military bases, Strategic Air Command. And then, that was the first command. And then the world was sliced up like bologna into commands under the Defense Department. And at least back in the day before the Second World War, they at least were on the Defense Department, the War Department, right? It was all about war. And we had been fighting war since, Christopher Columbus, right? And so today was quite interesting because nearby me, so in that little triangle, there are all these TVA lakes. It's really beautiful. I live in this, I keep calling it the Sawtooth Mountain accordion between the Appalachian Mountain Range and the Blue Ridge Mountain Range. And we're being, those 2 mountain ranges have squeezed. So we have these mountains that are like this, and not kind of the Blue Ridge lumpy mountains. And there's lots of water here, and it's been all dammed up, and it's all been juiced in. And it's a green, lush place, and it was bucolic wonderland up until 1972. And the first thing that started to really affect it was the paper mills in South Carolina, right there in the flatlands, right where kind of, a 77 runs into 26, right in North Carolina there. And then if you take this other road, 207, I think it is, it used to be, the Dixie Highway. It still is in chunks, it's like Route 66, 40 took over Route 66, and 66 still exists in chunks, but not continuous. But so is that road. So that road, which is the Dixie Highway, it's still kind of there. And the Mead Paper Company and Southern Pacific and a few others bought up all that land real cheap and put in trees that make paper, type of pine tree that, from planting to harvest is like 20 years. So you take out a whole state, so that whole top part of South Carolina, where there's water, and you put a big forest, you take out all the farmland and put all these trees, and you can harvest them and turn it into toilet paper and napkins and you name it, and writing, whatever paper, right? But the process is quite toxic, right? And it uses esters and chelates, and other chemicals, all from the oil industry. All these industries, plastics, um, pharmaceuticals, are all made from petrochemicals, right? Because the oil companies that had all this oil, they had to keep figuring out newer products to turn into, profit, right? And so, problem with the petrochemical industry is that its toxicity is mind-boggling. So when they made this paper, they pumped the really nasty dioxin stuff that was basically Agent Orange, and it went up in the air and floated across South Carolina and then ran into the mountains of the Blue Ridge, and that whole range up near Mount Mitchell and where the Nolichucky and the French Broad and all near Asheville, Waynesville, it got barbecued. And like within a 15, 20-year period, like Mount Mitchell, it was covered by these pine trees. And now it's a bald mountain. And they I don't know if they still have, but they used to have a very nice lodge up there that Forest Service ran, and they had very nice camping on top of Mount Mitchell. And in that lodge, you could go get yourself a sandwich or an ice cream cone or soda or whatever, and trinkets and you name it. And now I haven't been there in a long time, but they had all of these amazing photographs that Ansel Adams did at the turn of the 18th into 19th century, the 1920s or so. That whole little period, 1890s to 1920s, whatever period he was doing that, and they took them all down. And I think they burnt them because I asked the forest. I knew the guy there, and I said, "What happened to those photographs?" I'm a photographer. I'm a big fan of Ansel Adams. They said, "Oh, I know. We took them down." And I said, "What'd you do with them?" "I don't know. Maybe we threw them away." I said, "You still got them? I'd love them." Right? It's, maybe I'll check for you. I never heard. But he was gone the next time I went up there, and I said, "So what happened to those photos?" "What photographs?" I said, "There was a forest up here. Never a forest up here." And then there was a guy named Rod. No, what was his name? He was a trust fund boy, maybe 10 years older than me, Julian Price. And he basically went into Asheville and bought up most of it, all the really amazing architectural buildings, so they wouldn't be screwed with because he knew what was coming. And when I was there between 91 and 99, you could have bought a house there for, almost any house in downtown Asheville for 12 grand, to 12 to 30 grand, right? And there was some really, that used to be the Paris of the South. And that was very similar to where I was in Long Island in 86. I bought up a bunch of stuff, fixed it all up. It was, I was on the thing of being really woo. And my partner was my dad, and he freaked out because he had no idea what I was doing. We were making a lot of money, but he wasn't in charge. He was signing the checks, but but we were making a lot of money. And his lawyer was like, "I don't, you stop, fussing about your son here. He's like the golden goose. He's making money, more money, more money, more money." And my dad couldn't take it anymore. He said, "Triple Virgo has to be in charge." So he called the lawyer. So I'm pulling the plug on the business, right? And my dad and the lawyer called me, "Hey, you better come down to the office." Went down there. My dad, and I knew because my father did this to my brothers and sisters in the other business he had with them. And they worked for him for 40 years, and they were like, he paid them well, but he told them that it was their business, and it wasn't. It was his and my mother's. And so when they got to this point of whose business is it, my dad just folded it up and forced my brother, my oldest brother, not my other brothers, but my oldest brother to buy it. And he had put 40 years into it, not like the others. The others were came later, and I had nothing to do with it because I knew that my father would do that. And when I was in New York, there were time after time. I said, Dad, 30 grand, we could buy this whole building. It's worth $1 million. Oh, it's a piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. So that's why he came to me in 86 because he wanted, well, it was early 80 or 82. 86 was about when he pulled the plug. And anyway, long story short, I knew he was going to do it. So in that period of time, I had been doing a ton of other things, on my own salary and using the flow, not the money per se, but what we were doing to do other things. People were watching me do all this stuff. Boy, would you want to do some of this with me? So when my dad said, I'm pulling the plug, we don't have a business anymore, and goodbye and good luck. I said, fine. See you. Bye. What? You're not going to argue? You're not going to go upset? I said, no. Why? I knew you're an asshole. You told you right from the first beginning you're a fucking asshole. But you wanted to do it. So when I had nothing else to do, so I had nothing else on my busy calendar. So I did this, and I got involved in the Stop Shoreham campaign. I started a number of art galleries. I started working for all the homeless people that showed up on the street once Ronald Reagan threw 6 million people that were in mental institutions on the street. I started getting them a place to live, right? Kind of social activism. And I do that because it's fun. It makes me feel good, right? So I did that, and I just walked out of my the lawyer's office, and I saw, I didn't even I knew I wasn't a partner, even though my name is on the truck, So basically, and he, the house I was living in, he said, you got to get out of the house, right? So what was quite interesting was it was time for me. I'd done everything there out in Long Island, and it was time for me to move on, right? And I was doing this homeless thing, so I went to where the homeless was in New York, and took over 50 abandoned buildings. Now I had a bunch of, you know, I had a momentum of being a contractor and a master electrician in New York and Long Island. So I went right into that and became the adjutant technical director of this movement. And we took over 50 buildings, housed 500 families, and basically saved the Lower East Side from being gobbled up. And now you go there now. I know what it's in 2011, it was at its zenith of being the amazingness that we did in 88, right? So I left in 88 and went to Cornell and I had already started my career as a itinerant scholar. You've heard the story of my exploits in Ireland with the old Irish crone. And that was the beginning. And actually, I started earlier on with Billy Kluver when I was about 10 at the Council on Foreign Relations. He had a thing called Automation House, right? And then, when I worked for Grandpa Stoll and Mike at Stoll Electric down on Duane Street, I, I lived in Tesla's laboratory, which was known as Mohawk Electric Building, right on the corner of Duane or Reed. On one side was not Chambers, but Varick, and on the other was Hudson. It's right where Hudson starts. And I was in that. And then I kind of worked for Hotel Bar and Butter, took care of all the refrigerators. We helped start a thing called Collaborative Artist Projects, a thing called PS1, a thing called the Brooklyn Academy of Music, a thing called the Knitting Factory, a thing called Franklin Furnace, a thing called Danceteria, and a number of other discos. So anyway, that's the kind of life I had, and I always had whatever I needed because I was always doing God's work. Didn't quite realize I was doing that, but I was in that flow, right? And let's see, where are my reading glasses? Hello, hello. What do you got to say? What do you think about all of this? What's the air you're breathing? Are you on the east coast of America? Are you up in Canada where everything's on fire? Did you know that everything that's on fire is being caused by space-based weapons? You know, we have this little thing called breakaway civilization. If you ever saw any of Stan Lee's Marvel Captain America, Hail Hydra, that's exactly where we are. If you ever saw the X-Men, right, that's exactly where we are, you know. And, you know, hold on to your jockstrap because maybe we're about to take a ride. And I would say this weekend, I've been talking about the aliens landing on. So I had an NGO, and I didn't have, I helped start an NGO in watching from Kenya. So, oh, Gracie Carey Mission. See, I had put on my glasses, I can see you. So I want you to tell the audience about Africa. As I was telling a friend earlier, if I was 30 years younger, I would move to Africa because Africa is the continent that has the most opportunity, has the most amazing young people. It has the greatest art, the greatest literature, the greatest music, all coming from there. Uh, uh, uh. I want to show you some pictures, Gracie. This is the art world in New York City. You know, that's the Mary Boone Art Gallery. That's some of my art. There is Mr. Uh, he's the godfather of punk. He didn't front. He was behind CBGBs, and there's me. I was the dude, right? And I was doing all this stuff. This is me in the 30s, and when I was in my 30s and 40s, right? And so the Lower East Side, and here is we are breaking into an abandoned building. We took over 50. I, being a master electrician, I could put, you know, electricity, legal electricity. Here I am in state, right? I'm in state. Here is the smartest human on earth, Christine B. She invented computer graphics. She started SIGGRAPHs for the IEEE. She was my sweetie, right? And she loved me because I was always there for her. I understood everything she was doing, but I was not in competition. This is my second wife, Italian Roman goddess. She had her own multi-million dollar handbag industry. And here is Sarah Ferguson, who was one of the major movers of Brooklyn Academy of Music. Here is Carrie Shea, the most powerful political fixer in, at least in New York, Boston, and DC. And so this abandoned building I took over and I turned into a fancy restaurant on the inside. It's up in the South Bronx, and I had a bunch of gangster guys who had their own limousine service, and it would pick rich people up in front of Grand Central Station, right under the bridge where Park Avenue kind of grows around Grand Central, where all the airlines had their little storefronts, and where the Pan Am building had, I don't know what they call it now, and the limousine guys would fill up with rich people and take them up to the South Bronx and to this abandoned building, and we'd have steaks, lobster, and any kind of you know eggs you wanted, and champagne. Here's Christine again, and she all she did was work, 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 and all I did was take her to fun places and make her happy, because that's what made me happy, making her happy, not wanting to oh, she's the smartest girl, so I'll get a job from her. I mean, her boss once offered me a six-figure salary to stay her boyfriend because ever since you became her boyfriend, she's she's very productive. Here's a guy who's headed NYU's um, anthropology department, a really uptight, stick up his butt kind of guy. And I used to just cruise in there and show photos of all the different indigenous people I live with and tell stories about it. And it would put all the tenured professors and why is he here? Well, this guy said, I love his stories, right? And so one day we were out taking a walk around Washington Square, and he said, "I want to be like you. I want to be like you. I my whole life was about being the head of this department and being a tenured professor and being published, and I don't care about it. I'm miserable." And I said, "Okay, so what are you doing this weekend?" He goes, uh, what do you, why? I said, you want to be like me? What are you doing this weekend?" And he said, I'm I said, "This Friday, I'm having, I had this apartment on Ninth Street and Avenue B with Allen Ginsberg, right? And every Friday we had a potluck dinner, and, the intelligentsia uh, of the world was coming to our potluck dinner. And Timothy Leary, this is 1967, maybe, no, this is 82, maybe. I'm not quite sure. Somewhere in between 67 and 82. Um, Timothy Leary, it's in the, I have no idea. Somewhere between 67 and 82, somewhere in there. And so um, Timothy Leary was sleeping on our couch. And so he had some really good Sandoz. Now, I didn't need to do those kind of drugs because I had already lived with a lot of indigenous people, and especially the old crone, who showed me meditation was way more effective than any drug you could ever use, because the drugs are just affecting your meat puppet body, right? Now, Grace, you understand this, right? Being in Africa, I'm sure you understand indigenous religions and indigenous peoples, and I'm sure you had a granny who had a nice garden. So, anyway, so I had this Sando stuff, and I would take it, and it was just like, taking, you know, people take, what is that stuff you take to go to sleep? Starts with an M. They have gummies. Anyway, I just put a few drops on this guy's tongue, and he was off to the races. And he never quite went back to being the stick up the butt kind of guy. He definitely became the man he was meant to be. So he is like tripping his figurative balls off, and I didn't take anything. I'm just there to be his guide, right? And that's what I'm here to be. Yours. I am your griot. Grace, you know what a griot is, right? I'm sure you have an uncle or a grandfather who's a griot, or even a grandmother who's a griot, right? Tell us what is a griot. I mean, I want to hear from you. Your uh, what do you do in Kenya? What's going on in Kenya? No one here on the web knows anything about Africa. They don't understand that Africa is the, you know, as Gil Scott Heron said, have you heard the word? Johannesburg, right? It's still that, right? It's that still conflict of imperialism is right, and people are going on and on about imperialism of the United States. No, that there's three legs of the stool. There is the Vatican. There is D.C., the District of Columbia, and within that, the Pentagon, the Devil's Stone, and the City of London, where all the money is, right? And all of what is going on in the world is scripted from those three places. And DC, United States, is just the bully boy. We're just the people who pull the trigger. We are not. We do not have an. We are not the hegemony of the world. We're the slave. And we don't even know it. We have the worst healthcare, the worst housing, the worst environment, the worst. Well, not the worst. Some of the worst environment, um, worst education, for the richest, most industrialized country in the world. Our people are slaves, right? Now, I used to make a lot of money being this in the corporate world, being able to see trends, see things coming. I got paid very well for that. And I enjoyed it. Meaning I had access to a lot of stuff. I was swimming in the deep end of the hedonist pool, and I didn't feel guilty at all about it. I didn't feel bad about it. I mean, yeah, I knew I was committing suicide, but it was in a pretty pleasant way, a pretty. And every time I talk to God, he goes, "Don't worry about it. I want you to experience this so you know what you're doing, right? And you know what it's worth, and you know what, not to do, right? So I'm not going to tell you a thing. I'm not going to say this is bad, this is good. You're being sinful. No, not a word, right? If you read the whole frigging Bible like I do, I read it every day, right? And I let God, I take the Bible, I kind of, my Bible, I have a number of Bibles. One of them's right over here. I'm not going to go sinking for it, but it's over there. I kind of take it. I just kind of do this with the pages. Wherever it stops, there it is. So here we are. I'm working. We're giving classes. This is a really good buddy of mine who's a great carpenter, and this is a burned out building, and we are putting scabbing beams to put a workable floor on, right? So we can work on the floor above. And here's me painting. I used to be a painter artist. I used to be a sculptor artist, but my sculpture wasn't stone or anything. It was in light. Let's see. So I could have, here's the picture out the window from my loft, my 17,000 square foot loft, artist loft in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. One of the first guys there. 17 square foot. I had like 300 windows, 360-degree view, right? And I was paying 375, heat included. Here's Michael Savage. He was Man Ray's nephew. So we went to Paris and saw Man Ray. That was fun. And Michael was like a younger version. And here's the homestead. We had our collective meetings. Nothing gets done unless you work together. And that's why we succeeded. In 2011, I left New York City when my second wife died. And that's a hard story to tell. And my Italian queen. And because unlike Christine, who worked, I could tickle her fancy and bring her on vacation. I showed her what bliss was about. And my second wife, my Italian queen, my handbag princess, I mean, she that's why she was with me. She loved that. And the other fact that everything I did was to make her happy. And it made her so happy. It's not so much what I did, but that the fact that I only thought about making her happy. My happiness was to make her happy. And it was simple. Pick up my socks, put the seat on the toilet down, don't leave any dishes in the sink, stuff like that, right? Don't leave a mess. Because she lived on Park Avenue and we lived together in her unbelievable Park Avenue apartment. And she would make a lot of money, but in the fashion district, there are these 2 or 3 months where money gets tight. And she had a factory of 42 workers. And in the garment district in those days, what they do is they'd lay them off. But these people were like her family, her children. So she didn't want them to have a hard time. Plus, she taught them she didn't want to not have their skills when she needed them. So she had them doing stuff that she always needed to have them do, but she wasn't making money. They were preparing to, make the big line and then put it to show, and then she'd make millions, right? So that's how it is. So, the 5 years, with 7 years I was with her, for 5 years, things, we were like married. But, there are a number of friends of mine who are like playing with marriage. They've been together with each other. They love each other. They have a home together and they want to marry, right? And one of them says, yeah, whatever, you want to let's go down to City Hall, get married. Or like, you want the big wedding? Let's have the big wedding. But one is like, I want this wedding. And it doesn't mean the girl. The guys, that one of my friends is a guy and he's all about the big wedding. And she's, oh, let's just go down. The other guy, the girl wants it, right? And the other person, they both kind of want it, but don't know what they want. And they're both ready, and they're doing pretty good. I've helped them realize who and what they is and what they should be thinking about. And in their work day world, they're doing pretty good. but they're kind of adrift on. I mean, they really love each other. They're living with each other. They're happy with that. They have a nice house. They blah blah blah. Life is going good, and it's like that quiet zone before the storm, and they don't know what's next and what they should be doing or how they should be doing. So let's get married and have a big party. And I used to be, I was a photojournalist. I was a wedding photographer. I had a what was a called industrial photography. Um, and I had a studio with Donna Ann McAdams, DNA Studios in New York, right? And we did very good. But Donna, after 10 years, said, "Listen, I love you. I love what you did for me. I love all the life we had together, but I want a different life. You've opened certain doors. It's like opening Pandora's box. I opened certain things in her where she could be truly be herself. So she wanted to go up and be herself. I said, fine, honey, I love you. I want you to go be yourself. So she did. And let's see, I think I have a picture of when we came back from Australia, and we had been part of a uh, Circus Oz. Go Google Circus Oz, Punch Hawks. Right. So here's my godson. I mean, my sisters. These are my youngest sister's daughter and my older sister's second son. Right, my godchildren. Right. And they both, so they would come. I was, cool. This guy, I don't know how many shows I took him to Madison Square Garden when I put him like right on stage with Kiss, and then we went to the after hours party, right? And once he got married and had kids, he said to me, and this is when my mother died. He'd been married, has his first kid. My mother dies. He goes, and we're at the thing. Goes, Al, I don't really want you to come around my house. I don't want you to have anything to do with my kids. I said, I brought you up. He goes, yeah, I don't want you to do that with my kids. I said, what's the problem? Look, you turned out okay. He goes, well, yeah, but I'm a different guy than I was then, and I'm all about. I have a corporate job. I do this. I do that. I don't want my. You scare me when you're so different. You're so free. I want to be like you, but I don't. And that was the last I saw him. And that's a shame. So living alone. So you living alone. Well, I'm living with God, really, and Mr. Bunny and Madam Butterfly. And right now, I had, see, after my parents died in 2008, I kind of took care of them, and I had a house in a place called Stuart, Florida, which was that was the old Hollywood. That's where all the 1920 Floridian, I mean, not the Floridian, but the Hollywood, the people, see, before the 20s, the movie industry moved from New York to Hollywood because it was sunny there all the time. New York rained a lot, so it was hard to make movies outdoors because they didn't have lights, right? So, um, so anyway, they went to Florida. That was their getaway party place, right near Stewart. Is just up the road from this place called Hutchinson Island. No, not Hutchinson Island. No. Jensen Beach is where I. So my buddy, who I bought this house with in Stewart, was a lawyer. He and his wife were lawyers, and I had met them earlier, 4 or 5 years, and had. I was working for the Desperate Lawyers, and so were they. And they were in the second notch, and they were like going on, the ladder up. And at a certain point, they were both interesting people, both really good lawyers, and they didn't spend their money on looking good. They just kind of spent and bought themselves a really nice. They both like sailing, and they bought a very nice sailboat, and they lived on that sailboat. And I met them working on a project for a lawyer, but I had a buddy who was a real estate developer in Fort Lauderdale, and Fort Lauderdale is like the Venice of Florida because it has all these little waterways that people put their boats in, and some of them are pretty deep, and So I was living on this very large yacht that had sunk at its moorings, which is blah 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 blah, right? So the bottom floor where the motor was and the crew would have been was underwater. And then where there was another kind of murky thing, it was kind of moist, and then there were three decks above it that were dry. And this guy I was working for the real estate guy, so he wanted me to be there in Fort Lauderdale and do X, Y, and Z, right? And I was working for also this lawyer guy, right? That was in Fort Lauderdale, so not a problem. So I was living in this sunk yacht that was really quite it had bedrooms. It had I forgot what it not the main room was really beautiful. It had went out onto the deck and big windows and had a beautiful galley and then had another party deck above that and another party deck above that. And that was my place to live for free. Nobody it was a little musty. When it rained real hard, and it's Florida, it does that often, it would get a little wet pretty much everywhere, and there were no maid service, so, the average person, not so much, but my buddy, he said, "I think you'd really like this place." I would have wild parties. So, working for this lawyer, have a wild party for all these lawyer people, and, there were these 3 lawyers that were just so much fun. I wish I could bring alive one of my cell phones that have all those images on it. And in this place called Hollywood, um, just kind of between Miami and Fort Lauderdale, there was a strip of bars, and this other guy that was a friend of my real estate guy, he made all these great, and they had like a boardwalk, and so I helped him build a couple of bars. And one of them it was just a parking lot. And he said, "What can we do with this?" And, I went down to the building department and they were so, anal about, so you know what we're going to do? We're going to get a big tent and we're going to just stick it on one end of the parking lot. And then we're going to fill everything because you know what the thing that Florida sells the most of? I don't know if they still do, but at that time they did, was sand. Florida sand is everywhere, right? China used to buy a ton of it. It's great for making concrete. So we bought, like 100 yards, which is a lot of sand, and just covered the thing. And we dug holes and we put potted big palms there. And in Florida, you put anything in dirt and let water hit it, it grows. So everything we kind of made cut holes in the parking lot and put lots of palms and Florida plants and lots of sand and this tent that covered it was a kind of like psychedelic big not like tent but it was just a big I got these big fiberglass poles put them in the beauty of the parking lot was that you could drill a hole and stick something in and it gave it lateral. So we had these big fiberglass poles that were about that thick, and we hung the tent off of it. It looked like a Bedouin kind of thing. And we put the bar and tables inside there and hung Christmas lights. And the parking lot had an electric meter and a panel. So, and it had water and it had septic line, had a toilet, right? So we built a deck and we put, guys' toilets and girls' toilets. And the plumbing guy said, "Yeah, that works." I mean, you already kind of had that, just one toilet. Now you got 6 toilets and 4 sinks and some sinks on the back where there's a kitchen. Totally fine. So we started that. And I would take all of the um, interested parties in the lawyer business and just get rip roaring drunk and stoned and dance the night away. And that's how I negotiated deals. Just get people having a good time. And so out of that, I met these 2 folks and they were making money at what we were doing because it was like a boilerplate vehicle to get corporate entities who were unbudgeable on their contracts with X, Y, and Z to loosen up. It wasn't rocket science. And I was very successful at that. Because I would read people exactly who they and what I'm really good at cold readings. and I'd read exactly what they wanted, what they needed, etc. And then I would take it into the boardroom, and they would go, "Okay." After having a great fun day, we would do that. Or I would stick them in the boardroom and not let them out for 2 days, not able to go, "You gotta go to the bathroom, there's a bucket." It was like the carrot and the stick. And that was basically my negotiating technique. It did really good. I worked 11 weeks of the year making about 70 grand. And I had all these properties and things going on. And I had a great lawyer and a great accountant, these two folks, friends, that, legally, I did what Warren Buffett did, buy, borrow, die. Right. So I was doing the corporate shuffle, but in my own kind of fun way. And that's why Guy kept saying, "Don't worry about it. You're doing a good thing. I sent you everything you do. Forget about it. You didn't think of doing this. I sent you here. Why I'm here. God put me here." Right. So that's how I'm looking at it. And so I'm not alone. You know, God has always got my back. And God always puts me, like today. I went around and fixed people's lives. This one friend of mine makes, doll houses and bird houses and every kind of little house and sells them online and at county fairs and stuff. And he's got all these old holler guys knocking his shit out. And because they got nothing else to do and they make pretty good money. But yeah, I went to visit him at his office. It's this ramshackle barn that's about to fall down. I mean, literally about to fall down. And it's full of, just think my place is full of stuff. Here, let me give you a little before I erase this. Because I did this last night to show you guys. Whoops, wrong button. Do 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 do. So here, this will tickle your funny bone. Come on. So this is where we make the bird, and there's a bird house, and that's when it's on the, the pile. Oh, and that's well, this is where the magic happens. Anyway, so this is where I live. This is my garden. This is the deep green. And it's in a holler, so it's always cool. No matter how, like right now in the sun, it's about 90 degrees. And so here's a man cave. Here's a walking thing of where I live.
From whom the whole body, fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the...
This is a man cave.
In the measure of every...
This is where I sleep, read, write,
trace of the body, unto the...
and survive the winters.
In law.
And my heat is the electric blanket.
Around, which is the key.
And there's a little electric
speaking of the unity
radiator there, and my gas stove,
around
and the quarter-inch of insulation between this ceiling and the metal roof. And when this winter, it was 20 degrees below zero. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, all the way through the New Year's. And I could keep it around
illustrations of
38 here,
the church,
right?
The fact that
and I didn't keep the heat on 100%. I kept the electric blanket around me 100%, but
and of course all of that is pushing us toward or helping us to.
And here we are listening to the Christian radio stations. That and the public radio is the only thing I can really get, which is an interesting back and forth. So here is part of the sustainable paranormal right here. And we go outside into the deep green. And it's kind of lit up like a carnival, because it is God's carnival. So this is how I wash my clothes. You can hear the rain. I just put them out on the line. And I have a little spritz bottle. Where did I put the spritz bottle? Here it is. It's got a little Lysol, a little detergent, a little Dr. Bronner's. And I just do this. And it actually cleans the clothes quite well. Right? And these were all kind of stuck in bags and under the bus, and they were all moldy, right? I mean, moldy, like kind of, this is a good example of how, this was rotting, right? This was rotting, kind of rotting. But, I'm going to use it for something. And this is what is called sustainability. You don't throw stuff away. You embrace what it is. This thing, Colonel Sanders' dog shit on it. And it was brand new. They took it out I had it in a bag, and they kind of, I have no space. I had a big school, 7,000 square feet. I had a big factory building, about 26,000 square feet. I had a studio, about 4,000 square feet, about 10 houses. All of that was not sustainable. It kind of was within the economy that we have today, the consumer consumption. And I was making good money. And if I bought that real estate, I had to pay tax rather than put the money in the bank. I bought low and sold high, So there's a Hopi Sitchin. I'm going to cover this whole thing with art. And this is my bro, who I shared a bedroom with, but not much else. Because he tried to be my dad, not to me, but to be my, he was competing with my father. There was no competing with the colonel. And my brother's just a cardboard cutout rather than being himself, right? So he felt guilty, and because he got the majority of the cash, he wrestled away from my dad before my parents died, and when the economy was still good. And then my sister had the, power of attorney. She made every wrong mistake, and she ran $6 million into $400,000. I wasn't expecting anything, and I never depended on anything, right? My parents, they put all my sister's kids through school, right? And them and everything, and not me. Anyway, so I'm just babbling here. So my brother gave me that. So, and he didn't give me the title, so I couldn't sell it. He goes, "You just sell it." So I'm not selling it. I'm just using it and turning it into art. I have no idea how long I'm going to live, nor do any of us. And I've died so many times, my doctor can't imagine how I stay alive and don't need their medicines or their operations, So that's it, because if I keel over, I keel over, right? So I'm trying to get someone I can work with to buy this place for me and let me stay here until I do keel over. Because why would I keel over tomorrow? The state or the bank or some of the morons who are here would try and steal this thing, because I own it straight out. Anyway, see, it's really pretty place, right? And right up there is my, we'll walk up there, my deck garage. Why would I ever build another house? Instead of using regular doors, I would have garage doors, because you open up the garage door and you basically have the outside on the inside. So all of this lawn is on top of rock, right? God and I, had this growing rock. Is there a spot I can show you? Not much. This is about it. It's all about 6 inches of crushed run and then another 4 inches of, because this was a boggy mess. And it was as thick a forest as that, but worse because this was a bog, so there were all these old big trees. And it was a mosquito, no-see-ums heaven. And to get rid of it, I opened up the sky. So my property line is, see all these big tall poplars? That's about, 200 feet that away, from the poplars is my property line. I have about 2 acres. And I cleared this out. I'm the only guy who's in and out driveway, but I kind of let that end grow up. Otherwise, tweakers would have used this as a racetrack. But I want to do glamping here, right? Because I have about 20. I used to have my mystery school here, and I comfortably could put 20 or so campers here. I have about 20 campsites. And so when I cleared all this, it was stone, pretty much looked like that. And I turned it in to this. And I made this inclined plane up here to go from the man cave, and then up here to the garage deck. And see, I got campsites, about 8 campsites in there. Very nice ones. And so, of course, I don't have the 42,000 square feet I used to have. I have about 3,000, including, so this is how you don't get robbed. You put all your stuff on the outside. And so when people come rob you, they say, well, this guy has nothing to rob, look at this shit. What do I do, So, I got a lot of hammocks all over the place. And I don't have a refrigerator, I have these things. Because I get something I need to keep cold, I keep it cold until I eat it, like right away. Right. So here's the inside of the garage. And what do you do with a garage? You stuff shit in it. That used to be my walk bed, but I can't get up there anymore. and I have the king's throne here. I mean, I have an old people's toilet. It's up to about 8 to 12 inches higher than your basic standard toilet, so you don't fall. You're not gravitationally challenged. You can get off that thing relatively easily. And the septic line drops down 60 feet to the septic tank. Way down there. I mean, way down there. Like it's 60 feet. So as soon as you flush that sucker, it's like a jet engine. So I don't use much toilet paper, and the shit definitely. Okay, enough of that intimate information. So that's where I live. For all those who wonder, I guess no one really cares. They all left. So you live in all alone. So no, I'm never alone. I mean, people think I am, but God's always got my back. I always understand the dynamic of the illusion of duality, of loneliness. There is no loneliness. We're all the we and me. We're all our relations. So I'm with everyone, and that's why I, have had a life like this. Here's our theater company. Here's, and we did theater everywhere. Here's Carlos. And here is Dr. Samula, and she was another sweetie, and she was head of psychology at Fordham. Here's my Tesla coil, one of my Tesla coils, and here is I used to have I was part of an NGO called Alternative Technologies, right? And we did a thing in 1984 at the UN. Oh, here's my sweetie. Here's one of my other wives. So she was number 2 chair at Lincoln Center at cello, and she was a Sports Illustrated cover model for the swimsuit issue 4 different times. So she's a big Ford model. I had a couple Ford models, but she was one of my wives. Right? My first wife, my second wife, she was my third wife, and her daddy was super rich, a Swiss banker, right? And this is our loft in what was it called? It was a phone building off of Canal Street, Westbeth was what it was called. And the city, once there was a handful of us in the late '60s who went to Mayor Lindsay because we had these lofts. The only smart one of us was Andy Warhol, because he called his loft the factory. So the city didn't bother him because they had this big sign, the factory. So it's a factory because it was a factory building. Oh, it's a factory. Okay. We were making art in ours, and it was our studio. And they said, you can't have a studio. You can't live here. So we went down to Maryland and say, listen, buddy, we had all the maps. This is called Soho, meaning south of Houston, right? So everything from Houston to Canal, from Sixth Avenue Sixth Avenue there to Broadway was, basically Soho, right? And it kind of over here where McDougal was like, see, there was 2 little Italies, so one on the east side and one on the west side, right? And there was the West Village and the East Village, right? And so Soho was part of that. NYU was just, up there near Houston in the West Village. And so we were doing our thing, and we said, listen, have the building department, the fire department leave us alone. These are brick concrete buildings. We're not doing it. The factories were a lot more dangerous than what we're doing. So if you just make us a special, executive mayor order and say, this is where artists can be, we'll turn this into gold. And if you now Google Soho, New York City, you'll see what we did. Right. And we went up there and talked to like Mary Boone and Brooke Alexander and Mr. 420, and brought those are the 3 major gallery guys from 57th Street up near Museum of Modern Art. And we brought them. They got their satellites down there, and I had a gallery with Phil and Jane Bear called the Una Bear Gallery. She was born there. And it was a big, beautiful space right on the corner of Broome and West Broadway. And so our gallery was all the new unfound artists like Keith Haring and Julian Schnabel and Basquiat, Samo, and who else? John, what was John's? Bowman, Judy Rifka, Kiki Smith. And these are also the people and a number of other of us who started collaborative artist projects, which I said, we're all these big entities that so I worked at Lincoln Center. I went to Juilliard, right? Marion Tulin, who's on the board of Lincoln Center, Lester Polikoff, who was the godfather of modern theater scenery and lighting design. He worked for Joe Melzino. I was his best boy, right? So I was the dude there, right? And so they're getting all this umpteen millions of dollars from the National Endowment of the Arts, the NEA, and NISCA, New York State Council on the Arts. And I said, let's start a nonprofit and gather money to give to individual artists like us, right? So we don't have to starve. And why don't we start our own galleries? And why don't we start our own performance spaces? So we don't have to, you know, compete with Lincoln Center or, MoMA or, the big art scene uptown. And so we'll do our own art scene. And we did. And that's Soho, right? That's Tribeca. That's Williamsburg, Brooklyn. These are all places I was one of the first guys there, right? With all these other people, right? We were the, right? So around, I don't know, when was this? 80, 81, 82. They made this thing called Westbeth, and it had about, maybe 60 to 80 of 1,500 square foot walls, right? That looked like this. They were kind of nice open spaces with, you had a nice wall of windows, and then you could do whatever you wanted inside. And I built like a stage. So we could do poetry, we could do theater, we could do art, we could have, and I was doing my salons there. And there's my sweetie, and there she is. She's talking to somebody, but she's so good with the camera. And I was her personal photographer. And she's looking right at me, even though she's like talking to the whole freaking crowd. We were organizing an art show, right? And what better person to have as your poster girl is this sweetie? Look at you. I'm like, so, I mean, every man lusted after her, and I was the guy whose arm she was on, right? And she just loved me because I loved her for who she was in here, right? And I let her be. She was a wild child, and she like came from this multi-zillion-dollar Swiss family. She knew like 10 languages. Her dad wanted to be a politician or a banker or something because this was his son, right? His son was, and he died, and this was the other one who was whatever she did, she was number one, right, or the best she could be, right? And that was the great thing about it. She never competed. She was just amazing at everything she did. She didn't care. She was second seat cello at Lincoln Center at the symphony. She just loved playing the music. She didn't care being number one. Two was good enough for her, and still everyone looked at her, right? And we would go and I said, why don't we busk? She goes, busk? I said, come on, you're European. You know what busking is. And she thought of the French word. Oh, that. And I said, yeah. So we went to Central Park and made about $800. I said, what? She's like, whoa. Said, yeah. That's like twice what you make at Lincoln Center, and you're in a union. And she's like, whoa. Yeah. So we went, there were different. I had another friend who was a musician. So I knew all the good subway stations to play in. And we played in, and I knew lots of people in the different, because I had this other art organization with a woman named Suzanne. She was at Westbeth too. And we had this thing called Art for the People. I don't know if I have a picture of it, but no, somewhere else. And so we would do art everywhere. And the Port Authority, Suzanne was very good with, she was a rabbi's daughter. And so she really knew how to motivate, manipulate, control people who thought they were in charge. She was really good. So she really knew the Port Authority people really good. She also knew the Niska people pretty good. And my connect, I'd already had a number of years of doing stuff. And at first they go, who is this guy? And then I'd be doing these things and they go, wow. So yeah, we like this guy. So, and then the really smart people in the art world who had money, started, giving me cash to do things that would make them look good, right? And find them the new artists. All those artists I just named kind of percolated up into their stables, right? So, and so that was like the 60s, 70s, 80s. I left New York in 88 after doing all this kind of stuff. And the story of Stephanie was that after about a year and a half of us living together there and doing all kinds of crazy, but great stuff. She loved, we go on vacations, we do it because I would do a club or this or that, and then have a nice bag of money, and we go do something for 4 or 5 months and have the great go skiing because she knew Europe, unbelievable. And before I met her, I had lived in Sweden, and I traveled around the world on the Swedish nickel. And we went and did that, and we did all kinds of fun stuff. We had a good 2 years until her daddy showed up. Right, one day she got the call that her daddy was coming to New York to see some bankers, wanted to have dinner with us. He was staying at the the most fanciest hotel in New York that Donald Trump bought, and his wife Ivanka. That was the best deal. That was one thing that he did or put on his resume that really worked out well. But Ivanka did it, right? The cockroaches have arrived, and so it wasn't Statler Hilton. It wasn't the this or the, no, I forget what it was. Right on that little square where the fountain is in front of Central Park. Broadway here and 40 whatever street there, or 30 whatever. Anyway, so he was staying there. We went out to dinner with him, and then after dinner, he said, "I'm very happy. You kids are just having such a great time. It makes me so happy to see my 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 loving daughter. Really, this is the first time I've ever seen her really, really happy. You're really a great guy, Bob." He gave me the seal of approval, and we leave him there, and he goes, "I'd love to have lunch with you tomorrow. I have some meetings in the morning, and then why don't we go and have lunch at the Oak Room about 1 o'clock? The crowd will be gone. We can have a nice lunch. We can talk." And I said, "Okay." And so, you know, it was very nice. He's very cordial, very charming, very continental. They talked in French, and she and I talked French, so I kind of knew what they were talking about things. Anyway, so we were walking, and it was a beautiful night, one of those nice summer nights that it wasn't really hot. There weren't too many people. It was cool. We were walking over to, so I had a place on 27th Street that was in the meat market, kind of on the edge. And so we were like walking down Fifth Avenue, and then we're going to cut down 27th. And so she goes, let's walk on the east side and walk back up. Let's go to that nice little pastry shop that's always open on Spring Street, and walk up on the up on Water Street, not Water Street, West Street, and kind of by that hotel that all the punk rockers would stay at, Johnny Rocket or whatever. Anyway, so I said, sure, it's a nice night. Why not? So we did. We walked down, and she got kind of frisky because there's a really nice walkway over the FDR Drive that goes down past the UN building, and there's never anybody on it, and no one could say. So she just kind of went, and she had that in her. She had that. She'd get that little friskiness in, and she'd like wanna just gotta have it, as Spike Lee would say. And so, and I was always see that was it. That was whatever my woman wants that's what my woman gets. So anyway, so she was like, and so we're disheveled. We're in a bush someplace, and I mean because we were like on top of the park bench, rolling around on the path, up against where the railing is, where the FBI Drive. I mean, people were zipping by seeing this show, and then we were all over the place, and so we finally ended up in the bush, and we're like, and she goes, "I really love you. I wish my dad was dead." She said, "I really love you. I wish my dad was dead." Wow. And I said, "Honey, what? Wait, I was confused. I was very confused, and And so I said, "What's wrong?" He's here to, you know, to plumb the depths. He wants me married, and if he can turn you um, and take us back to Switzerland, he'll be happy. Otherwise, he will break us up, and I will be thrown asunder again. I said, "This has happened before." She goes, "Yes, but the other guys were sacrificial lambs. You, I like. I'd like to stay with you." And so there's a woman I was married to that we had no paperwork, nothing. She was a zillionaire, right? So, she goes, "Well, he's not dead, so you have to go have lunch with him. And he's going to give you an offer you can't refuse. And then that'll be the end of us." And I said, "Honey, nothing's going to be the end of us until we decide it's the end of us, not your dad." And she goes, "Well, we'll see." Well, we go home to our nice little place on 27th Street, and we snuggle, and it's nice, and we fall asleep in each other's arms. And the sun comes up, and I make her breakfast. I make her a nice omelet, a white egg omelet. We go down to Water Street. We do our exercise. There's a little park that no one knows that, right? And we would do our katas. She'd do martial arts with me. So we would dance around doing our katas, and we'd do push hands, and we wouldn't quite fight, but our push hands would get into really pushing hands, and she loved that. That was one of the things she loved to do, and so we did that, and then we walked all the way down to the Pepsi Diner. They had great breakfast and great burgers, and Saturday Night Live with John Belushi, Pepsi, Pepsi, Pepsi. That's the Pepsi Diner. They lived down there too. They lived on Hudson Street. They lived on Duane Park. I lived in Duane Park, and a Mohawk Electric building had the whole friggin' building when John Belushi lived down there. And one day he would come out looking like a bum, like looked like he weighed 400 pounds. Next day he'd come out slim, trim, wearing an Armani suit. It's like he was a pretty amazing guy. And we had a bunch of us took over a backside of a building that people was on Radio Row. It went right up against the World Trade Center Plaza, but that was lifted above, so it kind of went straight into the backside of it. Went straight into the concrete wall of the plaza. So and it was right on T Street, and the front of the building was on Chambers Street on the corner of Varick. It was like where Chambers ended into Varick, right where there's this little triangle. And it was just a kind of store there. But on the backside, it was a 1920s a speakeasy, 3 stories, brothel, wild play, and it was totally abandoned. I mean, somebody owned that building, but they only rented the front part. The back was nobody had been in that thing since the Roaring 20s or whenever. And so we broke. And one day I said, "What is it?" I found a door into it that was you couldn't see from the street. It was in an alley that went straight up against this gigantic concrete wall, which was the World Trade Center Plaza, right? So, I took my fire axe and chopped the door down, walked in there, and it was this up the top where the second floor, this big, beautiful staircase went up there. And up there was a brothel, all these little bedrooms, obviously. And at the top, was this amazing stained glass window that looked out into this street. I forget the name of it, but it's a street, but it's an alley, and it went up against one of the first big international banks. And across the street was where the commodities building is. And there's another little street that goes over to where Pearl and Wall Street come together. And so from this window, you see the commodities building and, the Wall Street market, right? Where all the stocks and bonds were sold. So this was where the rich and famous banker guys would fool around, have a good old time. Anyway, so I broke that door in there, and a stream of light is coming down in a pyramid shape all the way down almost to where I was, and I look around, and it's the place is covered in raccoons. And they look at me, I look at them, I said, "Get out of here." They just look at me, "Yeah, what are you gonna do about it?" So I went back and got my killer friend who just loved killing things and said, "Come here." So we went in there. I said, "I think it's time for you to have a good time." And so my killer friend cleared house, right? And then we made the Raccoon Lounge, right? So go say Blues Brothers Raccoon Lounge on Google. See what that says. Let's look it up. Hey, I got Google right here. Let's see what Google says. Do, do, do. Boop, boop, boop. Raccoon Lounge, New York City Blues Brothers. Well, there it is. That's what it is now. Yep, that's it. But see, that's the side. I think that's what's it? What street does it say it's on? There's Danny DeVito. So that's it today. And yes, that's it. But they cleared out what we had and turned it into a tourist site because we left it very raccoony. You know, see the pretty much everything. See, we didn't. We came in by the alley. We because we opened this place, no license, no tax, no nothing. We just so nothing that you could see on the street. You had to know where to go. About, let's see what it says about details. Jukebox, fireplace, pool, happy hour on the drawers at this 3 decades old watering hole. No, it's a lot older than that. Offerings, amenities, restrooms. Let's see what the restrooms look like. It just says it has some alcohol, beer, dine in. Yes. See, that's the thing about history. It always gets rewritten. Let's see what it says about the Ear Inn. Yeah, 59 Warren Street, New York. New York. Yep, that's it. But we came in on the other side. It's way downtown. There's okay. The Ear Inn, Spring Street, New York. Ear Inn, Spring Street, New York. There it is. So this is the place that Richie Heyman and I met each other on Spring Street, and again, they kind of redid what we had. We just basically opened up the door, and the back wall was missing, right? And it was just it was a workers' bar. It's right across the street where UPS has their building, right? And the little triangle at the end, and it was all owned by the Port Authority, the building. And so when Suzanne and I started doing art. We did art in that little triangle of that thing, and that's And Richie and I were living in the Ear Inn, and so were a whole bunch of other people. It was like, I mean, Richie and I basically got at the beginning because we wanted a place to live, and neither of us could afford it separately, so we kind of went into it. Richie had came from a pretty rich family, a well-known family, um, had a lot of connections, and he was a composer. He did movie scores and stuff like that, right? He wasn't like top 20s, but that kind of music. And he was trying to be his own version of Philip Glass. And I was part of what's his name's dance company, and that's where we did Einstein on the Beach and postcards to Queen Victoria, and Phil Glass became famous for the music of that. And Richie, he had a different. He did pretty good in his movie stuff, and he was happy. And he had other interests and connections, and he didn't have to worry about paying the bills really. So he had a trust, and so this is like the New York art scene between 1966 and 1988. That was my window of being the dude. And in 1966, I was 16 in high school, going to. I just gotten thrown out of Canterbury, where I was supposed to be a Catholic priest, a rocket scientist for the Pope, and ended up at the Winchington School for Boys. Let's see what they got for the Winchington School for Boys. Google. Winchington School for Boys. Yep, that's it. Boy, they got some money. They redid. This used to be a place for super rich kids who screwed up in every other prep school, and this was like the prison for them. And this ain't what it is. This wasn't the school that we went to. Kind of was. It's one of the classrooms we had, and they were really small. They were like 10 kids to a class, right? So there was no hiding. They got their own gym. We had no gym. We used to walk 5 miles downtown to where they had a hockey rink, a swimming pool, and their own gym. Boy, they got their own freaking gym. And they got girls there too. It was built on an old private education installation. That's what they call it. They still send me letters to see if I can send them money, Anyway, so I had quite the education. I did quite light, you know. And how much juice do we got left here? Oh, about 10 minutes. So, Gracie, get a hold of me if you're still watching. The dudewake42 at Gmail, dudewake42 at Gmail, dudewake42 at Gmail. And next time, I want to hear your story about Kenya, right? And that's what this, I tell you guys stories, but I want to hear your stories. Let's hear what you got to say. Okay? I want to hear that. So that was a nice little trip down memory lane. I hope you liked it. It was better than, showing you war and fires in Canada and, listening to reverse engineering of, so we're going to have visitation by aliens, I would say this summer. And the smoke screen that's being, burnt in the forests of Canada are being caused. You don't get this kind of smoke without it's not just a fire. It's being caused by energetic, uh, you know, energy weapons turning the forests, poof, right? And that's why they're covering the whole freaking East Coast. Come on, stop it. Oh, yeah, here we go.
I'm Amy Goodman. Large swaths of the United States and Canada woke up to hazy skies and air quality alerts for a third straight day today as thick smoke from Canadian wildfires continues to blanket areas as far west as Kansas and as far south as the Carolinas. New York City's skies turned an unworldly orange as the city recorded its worst ever air quality reading on Wednesday. New York Governor Kathy Hochul called the situation an emergency crisis.
It has an immediate impact on people's health. Irritation to the eyes, the nose, breathing, coughing, and even shortness of breath. So our message right now is going to be reiterated multiple times because it is simply stay indoors.
Some schools in New Jersey and New York have closed their doors today while hospital emergency rooms reported an increase in patients with respiratory issues. Flights were grounded at airports in the Northeast as cities including Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. also experience unhealthy levels of smoke. The worst of the pollution is expected to move away from the Northeast by Friday, though conditions may remain hazardous through part of the weekend. Health experts are advising people who need to be outdoors to wear N95 masks if possible to block out the dangerous fine particulate matter from the smoke. Forecasters expect the smoke to move south and west today. Meanwhile, activists are calling on President Biden.
So you don't get that kind of particulate matter from a forest fire. Once you use an energy weapon on that forest, it goes poof. Just go look at, let's see, a good example is what happened to the World Trade Center on 9/11. Do, 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 do. Video of collapse of 9/11 World Trade Center. Blah 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 blah. Here we go.
Oh my God, Lily's going to daycare there. Hold on, there's call waiting. Hello? Hi. Oh my God.
The building could not have collapsed just by an airplane flying into it. Structurally, the load is to the whole building. They don't show it anymore. They don't show it anymore. They don't show it anymore. They don't show it. Yeah, they don't show. They don't show. Chicken food. They don't show it anymore. That's when you see it, you can tell that.
Just before 10 a.m., a call comes through from the Vice President.
They don't show the building coming down, because when you see the building as a waterfall, you can tell that it wasn't. And they showed that building time and time and time again. So they're not showing it. They don't want people to remember how the building came down. And it came down like a waterfall from the sky of dust, just like what's happening. This is a reiteration of 9/11, what's happening right now, because the whole sky of the East Coast is what Lower Manhattan was. So you have, and that's the duality of the world. The little stories I told you about, how beautiful it was and what it was, and the life when you live it in the moment, not from the past to the future, because it always can be rewritten in the past and the future. See, they don't even show you that picture that they played over and over and over and over of the building falling. It's there, it's standing, and there's a big antenna, and you see the antenna fall, and then you see the whole building come. What was that about? What it was energy weapon being from space placed on that building. And so the inside disintegrated before the outside did, and then everything just came down. So if you want to really get a good glance of understanding, you go to, let's see, if it's even still in existence, or if they said it never existed. Let's see what they say. Architects and engineers 9/11 truth. Architects and Engineers 9/11 Truth. Architects and Engineers Truth, Inc. is an American nonprofit organization promoting the members, 6 board members, 2 staff members. Founder Richard Gage, Gage. Activists, World Trade Center Towers. See if they have the picture of the collapse. Criticized NIST for not having investigated the complete sequence of the collapse of the World Trade Center Towers, and claims that the official explanation of the total destruction of the World Trade Center skyscraper has explicitly failed to address the massive evidence of explosive demolition In particular, argues the building of the World Trade Center could not have collapsed at the speed that it was observed without tearing apart several columns of their structures with the help of explosives. And that's not, again, not how it was done. It was done by space-based energy weapons, because it turned the whole dust and went straight down into the basement. Explosive parts would be flying all over the place. The mast of the top of the North Tower had been blown outward during the collapse. There was nothing left to drive this building to the ground. Let's see, towers would have been possible without controlled demolition. Pools of molten steel, iron, rich Michael. And the other thing is, they started taking the building away hours after it collapsed. They had trucks waiting for it, right? In a situation like that, they usually put, it's a crime scene and they investigate. There was no investigation. No materials were taken. Let's see. Today, Zendik P. Bezant, professor of civil engineering and material science, Northwestern University, published with 3 co-authors a paper examining whether the allegations of controlled demolition might significantly justifiable. They found that available video records are not consistent with a free fall hypothesis. The size of the concrete particulate is consistent with comminution caused by impact, and that the high velocity compression air explains why the material from the towers were ejected to a distance of several hundred meters. The authors concluded that the allegations of controlled demolition do not have any scientific merit. The spokesman minister said that any sightings of molten metal, including metal seen pouring forth the South Towers, were likely molten aluminum from the airplane. Yeah, right. World Trade Center, according to the World Trade story high-rise building that was part of the World Trade Center complex, building number 7, collapsed in the afternoon, September 11th, is a smoking gun of providing most compelling evidence that something was suspect about the building collapse. Right, here's building number 7, didn't get hit by an airplane, didn't get hit by any material, but collapses in a tight, there were buildings like just right there and went whoop, straight down. And just happened, all the evidence of the Kennedy assassination, aliens, you name it, was in that building. And by law, they were supposed to be given out to the public the day after 9/11. National Institute of Standards, Technology, according to which uncontrolled fires in the building, critical support columns, blah, blah, blah. Truth questions computer models used. Community experts of structural mechanics and general blah, blah, blah. Critical official investigation, architects and engineers, the truth, has expressed concern, evidence, destruction of the World Trade Center. How much juice do I got left? Oh, we're almost getting down to critical. I'm going to leave in 5 minutes. See if they have anything, references, further readings, external links. No, they don't bring up the lady who had, let's ask Google again. It's almost 6 o'clock. (9/11) World Trade Center collapse caused by space-based energy weapons. Let's see. R. Humberg, cited by 3. Application of World Trade Center attacked public health. Energy weapons. Okay, let's see what they say. Up nowhere to go because the information regarding the energy-directed weapons. I would advise even Dr. Woods supporters not to minimize the lack, as it may very well prove the Achilles heel. The evidence she clearly lays out established proof that the new directed energy weapon pulverized the tower, effectively turning them into dust in midair. There have been attempts to debunk Dr. Wood's claimings. Her seismic data is wrong. Read more. Let's see. Must read, must share. USA Free Energy Weapons turned WTC into dust in 1945 and late in 1955. Commercial and military development of directed energy technology has preceded space, so use directed energy technology is likely to exist, and the data tells us it does exist. Read more. Atlanta Prince's story is grimly laughable once you read this book. It was a new weapon that brought down WTC, cutting the chase. What you were looking at as a result of a new weapon. Dr. Wood has utterly convinced me. Looking at the pictures after the tower came down, there's no denying it. The unbearable, hardly anything left of the building. Yes. Did the towers go? Office of Research data shows free energy, not planes, was among the weapons used against the WC. I'm personally familiar with free energy and knew before reading the book. Regarding Amazon, regarding the high probability that microwave technology directed free energy on its potential level most likely has used on the Twin Towers, and that a lot of steel and concrete simply turned to dust, according to a small amount of rubble. Yes, and that's why all those people died of cancer who lived down there. Had a lot of people who died. So, let's see. Yes. And there's me being live. So that is the picture. I mean, they showed it, over and over and over. The whole thing just turning to dust. That was controlled demolition. That wasn't a building coming down because an airplane hit it and caused a little fire on one floor. 3 buildings went down like that. And that's what's going on right now in Canada. So, nobody's watching. No one seems to care. I hope you like the show. And remember, don't believe a word I say. This is just for your entertainment.